Hello, everyone. Welcome to another 21 Hats conversation. Thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Feldman, your host. I'm very proud to introduce my guest today. He is Mel Gravely from TriVersity Construction in Cincinnati. Mel, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this since we talked a couple of weeks ago.
Me too. So let me start, Mel. Obviously, you decided that being an entrepreneur isn't risky enough. You decided to make your life truly interesting. You needed to do something really risky, like writing a book about race.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what led you to, didn't you have anybody in your life who said, have you thought about golf or some other pursuit? What prompted you to take this on?
So, it kind of snuck up on me, to be honest with you. And it's starting to hit me now that people are reading it and saying, yo, man, this is about race. Are you sure? So, so imagine that I went to this training that I didn't intend to go to because I didn't think that Black people really needed to do this kind of racial equity training because I've got lived experience. But I went to this training because I thought that the business leadership in Cincinnati should do it. So I attended this training. And this education just opened my eyes wider than they'd ever been and showed me these patterns. And so I leave this 2-day training and I'm just disoriented about everything that I see, all these patterns of behavior that now I can see because I've been educated on kind of how they've come about. And I was looking for what I can do about it. I talked to a few friends. I didn't come up with any real concrete answers. So I started to write because I love to write. And then the pandemic hit. And I thought, well, I got more time now, right? So I wrote more. And I wrote more. And before I knew it, I had these series of letters and I started sharing them with friends. And then I decided, and I remember when I decided, it was Ahmaud Arbery, the gentleman in I believe it was Georgia, that was chased down by the white pickup truck and they got in an altercation and he was killed. That was the day I decided we've got to have a different conversation about race in this country. And I got to stop talking about it and do something about it. And so those letters became an intentional book. And here we are, I don't know how many months later. And Dear White Friend is a thing. Yes.
And it's a good thing. It's a really good book. I highly recommend it, especially for business owners. Before we get into this, let me just say, for those who've joined us for this conversation, please feel free to throw questions into chat. We'll try to get to as many as possible. Now, I also want to mention that I'm going to publish a video version of this conversation. So if you don't see all of it, or if you have friends who you think should see it, you'll have an opportunity to share it with them. It'll probably come out in about a week. The best way to know that would be to subscribe to the 21 Hats Morning Report, which you can do at 21hats.com, and then you'll know exactly when this video comes out. Your book is called Dear White Friend, and my reading of it is that you really do write it. It's a very generous, warm book written as a series of letters to a friend, and I'm wondering a couple of things about that. One is you obviously put a lot of thought into how it would be read by white people. Were you concerned about how it would be read by Black people?
Yeah, yes. Your short answer is yes. But in the pre-reading group, there were equal numbers of Black and white, male, female, and some age variation as well, although less so than the race this diversity. But I was very worried that, and I was criticized a little bit, statements like, me saying, I don't think that you're a racist. We're a little controversial from my Black friends. How could you not think white people are racist? And some other, I got called accommodating to white people. And it did adjust my tone because I don't want to sound accommodating. I think we've got a sense of urgency here, and I hope I'm direct and pointed about that. But these are my friends that I'm writing to. And there's certain places you go with your friends that you can push them pretty hard, but it's in a way that respects the friendship and preserves the relationship. And that's what I've chosen to do. And I hope I've struck that balance, and we'll find out.
Yes, you will. My reading of it is that your tone is respectful and warm, but you don't sugarcoat things.
Yeah.
I think you say things that are going to make some people uncomfortable, and I think that was your intention.
Yeah, and I'm not a sugar coating kind of person. So my friends know me as that person, but they also know my heart. They know my intentions. They know I come to their aid just as they come to mine. They know that I trust them just like I ask that they trust me. And so, although the people reading the book won't necessarily know me, I think they'll get to know me through the writing. And that's why I share so many personal stories in it, because I want the people to get to know me, that I really am the generally smiling, pleasant, loyal friend, but I got a serious message, and I think it's time we talk about it.
You do have a serious message. You do have a lot of very moving personal anecdotes. I wanted to choose just one. It was hard to choose one, but the one I picked, correct me if I get any of this wrong, but I think it followed a conversation you had. It may have been with other business owners. It was a small group. You might have been the only African American there, or one of the few. And the topic of internet access came up, and you shared your concern that that's a problem. It's an issue. And there were a couple of people there who took a different view of it and said, wait a second, there are libraries and there are places you can go. There's no problem with internet access. That's an excuse. And what you wrote in the book was, their statements bothered me mostly because of how they were expressed, forcefully and adamantly. They were confident in their ignorance. Why were they so energized to attack this particular example of disparity? Their responses left no room for discussion or for them to receive additional insight. These two had decided they already knew everything they needed to know about this topic. And I thought, especially the line about no room for discussion, unfortunately, I think that's a problem for us in our society. I've had similar conversations way too many times. And I guess my question to you is, am I reading this right? Was that part of the reason you wrote this book? And also, are those the people you're hoping to reach?
Well, I don't know if I'm trying to reach those people. They're pretty close-minded. But I am trying to say, in general, we have to have better, more nuanced, more in-depth, more balanced, more forward-thinking conversations about race than we have today. This book is about the fact that until we discuss it back and forth, come to understand either what we can agree on or what we disagree on, and then create strategies on the things we can agree on, we're not going to make very much progress. And this was just an example of the way they stated it, that they hadn't really studied it. They hadn't really looked for nuances. They had no facts.
They just knew.
They just knew. And they were so damn sure that I started to think, well, maybe I'm an idiot. So I went and looked at the library to say, well, what are the hours? Maybe they're 24/7. And maybe the library comes to your house in the middle of the night, so you don't have to take 2 buses to get there, so that you can have the same internet access that I have at my house. I found out that's really not true, and that there's actually a chance that you don't have internet access. So, I know it's a small example, and internet access is not just a race thing, but the fact that they were so blatantly sure of themselves, and I run into that a lot, where they're not studied, they're not knowledge based, but they're certain about it. And when it comes to race, we've got to be a lot less certain, a lot more open. We got to start questioning what we think we know.
And I think that's what you do in this book. You acknowledge that we all need to know more about the history of race in this country, that none of us have been taught, or very few of us have been taught well about racial history. And you take on a lot of issues, and you anticipate a lot of responses. I imagine that must have been a grueling process in some ways. I mean, to study all that, to be able to write authoritatively about it, it's a lot to take on your shoulders.
Well, I really want to make sure I stay in my lane. I am not an expert in race relations. I don't even claim to be, but I have studied a great number, as you'll see, the book's well annotated, a great number of sources and researchers and big thinkers on this topic. And I've talked to my white friends in depth. And so I tell the story in the book. My journey with white people started in 1976 when I got bused to a different school. And since that time, I've been learning how to be with them. I've been learning their perspectives. And I don't always get it right, but I can anticipate their responses. And this book was an iteration. So I'd write a letter or two or six, and my friends would read them, and I'd get some feedback, and I'd say, oh, okay, that wasn't as clear as I thought it should be. So here's what I mean. I still mean it, but let me say it in another way. And it was that iterative process. I met with a young man last evening, and he had read this book early, and he had some comments about some things that weren't in the book that he thought should have been. And I agreed with him, by the way. I got worn out. I mean, I got to the end, and I just said, I'm tired. I mean, the book is done now. We're going to give it to the publisher and the editors and let them do their thing.
It's so interesting. Obviously I realized that the book is organized as a series of letters. I didn't realize that you had actually written it that way and shared it as you were doing it. That makes perfect sense to me now that I know that. And it must have had a real impact on how you were writing it, I'm guessing, adjusting as you went.
Yeah, it slows it down quite a bit because I didn't just give it to one person. I might give it to 6 people, and they've all got something to say, and none of it is the same, right? So you don't have many constant themes. And so I had to keep making decisions about, well, what do I really think? And how's what they're saying, really enlighten my thinking? And I think it was a great process. And I just hope readers agree. My mission here is to infect this country with a new way to talk about race, an on-ramp to the path to equity that I think we can have. And I hope we've done that in this book.
Well, that just makes so much sense. If you're trying to encourage real conversation instead of just talking at people, in a monologue, to write a book through a conversational process, I think that explains a lot of why you were able to anticipate reactions and try to deal with what you expected to hear back from people. Let's take a step back. I'd love, how did you go from that bus in 1976 that you just referred to being CEO and owner of a construction company in Cincinnati? Can you take us on that ride a little bit?
I can tell you that, and I'll try to make the ride short, or at least abbreviated as possible. If I look back on my life, and I do write about this in the book as well, it was a series of intentional moves by individuals and companies all along the way, because there was no path from my Black neighborhood to the seat I sit in today. Meeting you, being a member of Tugboat, being on boards of companies, being a leader in this community. There was no direct road from where I grew up to, and I don't want to say we grew up impoverished. That's not what I'm trying to say. It was a solid middle class neighborhood, but we just didn't have a path there. So even at my senior year in high school, I remember the college I ended up going to, coming to meet with minority students, my senior year, and they laid out this great program, that co-op program that they were starting. And it was a co-op program that started right after high school, and you'd co-op and take you 5 years, and you'd co-op every other semester, and it provided money and benefits and all this stuff. And it was my only way to college. And so I majored in computer science because it was a computer science co-op program. And I went to Mount Union College because it was a Mount Union program, and I co-opted at the Timken Company. All of these people were intentional about making sure folks had an opportunity. And that just goes on and on. I mean, when I left college, I went on to work for IBM. I tell the story. There were 7 people that started the day I started. 5 of them were Black. IBM was intentional. They were trying to give folks an opportunity. And that was a wonderful place. I learned so much and did so many things. And so it was just a series of intentional acts, even up into TriVersity Construction. I was not a founder. There were 3 other founders. And when they were looking to transition 2 of the founders, one of the founders came to me, and he was intentional. His vision of TriVersity Construction, this is a white CEO in Cincinnati, Pete Strange, Master Construction. He's a CEO emeritus now. He wanted to grow $100 million construction company. That was his vision. And he couldn't figure out why Black people couldn't do that. So he thought he'd start one, get 2 of his Black friends, and they would start this company. And they tried for a while, and they wanted to transition to new ownership. And my partner and I at the time bought this company, but it was Pete Strange intentionality about growing this company. And we'll manage a little over $100 million worth of construction this year. And we've got, close to 100 employees. And I hope people think we're good citizens in Cincinnati, and we're a purpose-driven, people-first organization. I'm pretty proud of that. So, just a series of intentionality all along the way to bring me to this point right here. And so, how could I not write about that experience and share what collaboration and intentionality can do?
I should point out, you referred to Tugboat a couple of times. For those who don't know, that's the Tugboat Institute. We both attended their annual summit in Sun Valley, Idaho in June, where you gave a talk that was extremely well received. You got a standing ovation from a group of people who don't usually give standing ovations. During that talk, if I recall correctly, I think you referred to yourself a little more pointedly than you just did. I think you called yourself an affirmative action baby. Do I have that right?
Yeah.
And that's interesting to me because I think some people might be tempted to feel diminished by acknowledging that you're volunteering it. How do you look at it?
Yeah, well, I've said before, there was no natural path to where I stand and sit today and the places I'm in. And so somebody had to affirm their actions that I have opportunity. That's really what somebody affirmed their actions. We've turned it into quotas and government programs and all. We've turned it into something different. But quite honestly, it was intentionality around having certain outcomes happen, because trying to create some equity in a world that had been unequitable for many, many years. And so I don't apologize for that. I say, for those critics, why don't you measure the return on investment and intentionality around, investing in me? So it doesn't diminish me at all. When I show up, I'm pretty confident. I'm not always so self-assured, but I'm pretty darn confident. And I know I try to deliver value every single day, and I try to give back, and I try to make a difference. And that's what I should be doing. So in my mind, it doesn't diminish me at all. I can tell you, though, the response to that comment, there were many white people that says, I can't believe you said that. It really does diminish you. And I thought, well, I don't think you should say it about you, but I said it about me, and I don't think it diminishes me at all.
I have had conversations with African-American entrepreneurs who have said things to me along the lines of, I just won this competition, and the reaction I get from people I tell about it is, oh, that's an award for Black entrepreneurs, right? Yeah. And it was, and they do feel diminished by it.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. So you know what? The world's not perfect, man. We have screwed this country up. Like we have such a great history, and then we've got this shadow side that we don't really want to talk about. But together, it's still a great nation. And so, you know what? If you get the Black Business Award, be happy with it, because you were recognized for your contributions. But we also ought to be getting the other awards too. My position is, I want a chance to compete. I want to be in the marketplace. I want a chance to compete. If you give me a chance to compete, I will build my skills. I will build my capacity. I will build my capabilities, and I'll compete. And that's all I'm asking for.
You referred in talking to about affirmative action to how it gets mixed up with quotas and other things. In the book, you write about an episode at your business where you tried to institute a quota. You instructed a division to, I think, hire 20% African-American employees, and it didn't go well. What happened?
It was a disaster, actually. They did it. My team is, I work with great people, and they want to pursue our mission. And I was either misguided or not clear, or didn't go do enough work, detail to get our folks ready. I said I wanted this division to be 20% Black. And so it became 20% Black, but they ignored performance. They ignored people adhering to our values, and they wouldn't step in and deal with people who needed to be dealt with from a managerial standpoint, because they wanted to stay at 20%. And we're not at 20% today. And I want to get to more than 20% in that division, but I also want it to be consistent with our values. And so we struggle with this as well, but I can't just set a number out there. I've got to set a number out there and say, now, what's our strategy to get there? How do we maintain the values and the excellence and the performance? Because if you don't, here's what happens. You bring people to the table, you give them a job, and some of them won't perform. If they don't perform and they're not dealt with in the same way that white people who don't perform are dealt with, you've done us a disservice to the African Americans that you brought to the table. So we can't be guilty of that. We got work to do. I mean, if this was easy, we'd already done it. You and I wouldn't be talking, and I wouldn't have written this exhausting book.
I'm sure you have white business owners who come to you and say to you that they want to be intentional, they want to hire minorities, but they're nervous for various reasons, and they're wondering what that means. Did you learn anything from that experience that guides you in how you respond?
Yeah, it taught me that there's nothing more important than the culture and performance of the organization, but it doesn't let us off the hook around our effort. And so hiring, meeting people where they are, evaluating our hiring practices and criteria, quite honestly, how many of those criteria are real and how many of them aren't? What's your training program look like? How connected are you with diverse communities so that you have a pipeline of talent coming your way? It does not excuse us from that effort. So I don't let anybody off the hook. As a matter of fact, I think they ought to be more diverse than I am, especially if they're bigger than we are, because they got more resources. So I hear the excuses. I get it. If you show me your effort and you'll make progress. I mean, I don't know any company that has sincere, thoughtful effort over time that doesn't make progress.
I've spent most of my career working for large media companies. They've struggled with this issue. One thing I've noticed is that if you make a hire and it's a white person and it doesn't work out, nobody goes, oh, yeah. we got to stop hiring white people. Yeah. But the converse isn't necessarily true.
It is. Again, that's just our messed upness around race in this country. And it's hard for me to get people to see that. But you're absolutely right. You go to a restaurant, it's not a great experience. If it's a Black restaurant, it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, that's why we shouldn't have done this, right? But, I've had bad food everywhere. I've had bad service everywhere. So I
Most
agree.
of us have.
Yeah. And so I think I keep telling my white friends, tell your white friends to stop thinking like that. Like, call them out on it. I can't be the guy always calling out all the white people. I think white people ought to talk about race a little bit amongst themselves. And it's one of the things I call for in the book. Make this a thing. Question people when they say things like that, because it's factually just not true.
So let's talk a little bit about what you would ask of business owners. You're very direct about this in the book. And you kind of recount the type of conversations you had last year, I guess, particularly after George Floyd, where people reached out to you and said, I want to do something. What should I do? Yeah. How do you respond to that kind of question?
Yeah. So there's some things I think we ought to do personally, but you're specifically asking about the business. And here's what became shocking to me. I had people who owned their business, some of them multi-generational business owners, who were the leaders of their organizations, and they hadn't thought about influencing their own sphere of influence. And so there is no company that I have more influence over than my own. And so, what are your practices, principles, objectives? What are you trying to do to solve the race? How are you looking at hiring? How are you looking at philanthropy? How are you looking at your supply chain? So I say, take your company and look at ways that you spend money, both on people and on supply chain and even in philanthropy, and say, how are we doing across this lens, right? So to me, looking at your own organization is just this great opportunity. And I was shocked. I mean, this is one that surprised me, that people said, I just hadn't thought about it. They want the world to change, and they're serious about it. They don't like racism. They don't like what they see. They don't want the protest, but they want everyone else to change in the world, but they hadn't thought about changing their companies. And so, all that's got to be supported by, some education and training, some cultural stuff that's got to happen inside of organizations to retain Black talent and other diverse talent. But start with your business. Why would you be looking at, writing a check to the Urban League? Not that that's a bad thing. Love the Urban League. But you could be doing something in your company to create opportunity. Lauren, what's missing here is a deeper connection between Black people and opportunity for employment, for promotion, for ownership, for wealth creation, for fair housing, for equitable health. It's that disconnect between them and this opportunity. And business owners can do a lot.
Well, that was a very broad look you just gave us. You gave us a bunch of different places uh, where something could be done, but it's not necessarily obvious how any particular business owner could address fair housing, for example.
Yeah.
Give me something specific. Suppliers, employees.
So let's look at the supply chain. In our organization, we want to spend in excess of 30% of our dollars with diverse organizations.
30% of $31 is $9.
Alexa is doing math for me. I don't know why Alexa did that to me.
Can you tell Alexa to be quiet?
Alexa, be quiet. Hopefully
it worked.
Hopefully you'll get rid of that before you.
Nothing wrong with that.
I have no idea where my mind was. So we want to be over
suppliers.
30%. Yes, we want to be over 30%. So somebody thought that was funny. Yeah. We want to be over 30% in spending, and particularly focused on African Americans. In our community, people of color, the predominant race is Black in Cincinnati. The predominant other race is Black. We've got others, and we cherish all that, but primarily Black. And so when we are doing projects, when we're looking at subcontractors, when we're looking at new subcontractors, we are always mining for and solving for who are contractors that can help us reach that objective. Who can we work with over time to change the complexion of our supply chain? Supply chain is powerful because when we spend money with an African-American owned business or any other diverse business, woman-owned, et cetera, we change the dynamic, the economic dynamics of that business and everything it touches. And so the ripple effect is amazing. And the wealth creation is very, very different. And so in our organization, we've set a clear goal. We've got, so people are being tracked against that goal. We've got systems in place to mitigate our risk. We're not just doing business with anyone, but there are a lot of people you can do business with. Maybe you can't do business with them on a $40 million project, but they're perfect for a $5 million project. And so we're constantly mining for that. And then the leadership team is asking the question, how are we doing? Because if I ask a question, it's different, it matters in our organization. People are like, well, Mel wants the answer to that question. He must want it for a reason. It must be an issue. So leadership can keep pulling that demand for that diversification of supply chain. But supply chain is one of the secret superpowers of businesses. And I think we underutilize it.
Yeah, my sense is that there's a lot more discussion about the issue of hiring for diversity than arranging your supply chain for diversity. I know it certainly comes up in government contracting and specific areas where it's mandated. But am I wrong about that? My sense is that this does not. No.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about it. I'm hearing more and more though about the. People want to measure how you're hiring too these days in those same subcontractor arrangements. But here's why that is. I think that people get it around employees. They get income. They don't get wealth. They don't get the importance of having other people in the wealth game, in the equity game. And it's critically important. The other thing is, if we go into most organizations and you find the Black people, they will disproportionately be at the bottom of the organization. And so, again, job's a job, benefits are benefits. Please don't misunderstand me. But we can populate that a little easier. Again, disrupting our supply chain somehow feels harder. And I'm saying it is one of our superpowers as business leaders. And we should be hiring, promoting, and we should be buying in our supply chain differently. I'll throw this out too. If you think you're going to hire a kid out of school that's super bright, and hire them in your organization, and one day they're going to be a vice president, the chances are that ain't going to happen. Because if you invite them into an organization that does not have a culture that surrounds and supports them, they feel connected to, they may stay a few years and then they move on to someplace else. So you really got to be intentional about having enough activity, mid-levels and even executive levels, even thinking about boards. I mean, how diverse is your board if you have a board advisor or board of directors? Because if you got a diverse board, they're giving you diverse input, and you're going to start hearing things that you might, or having to discuss things that you might not have been discussing before, all good and healthy for your organization.
Do you have any advice on how you kind of get started? I talk to white business owners, especially in the tech area, who do not have representation in their businesses, and they're acutely aware that that makes it harder to bring someone in, that, you know, somebody who has options is probably going to choose to go somewhere where they see themselves, as opposed to somewhere where they're going to be breaking new ground and having to answer questions that they may not feel the need to answer. Any advice on how to negotiate that situation?
So every situation is different. I'll say that. And I pull up short from giving too much specific advice. I'm not an HR specialist. I'm not a staffing sourcing specialist. But here's what I'll say. I also am not a nuclear physicist. But if I needed to solve that, I'd get myself a nuclear physicist. And so if this is really something leadership wants, then go seek out smart minds that can help you put a strategy together, just like you would if you were trying to go more green and be more sustainable. If you were trying to, open an office in another country, you'd get advice on those. Or you were trying to start an ESOP, you'd go get the best minds to help you think through what is a strategy that applies to our organization. Why is this different?
That is such a great answer. We're getting some questions in chat. I think you've sold at least one book to somebody who wants to know the best place to get it. Is it available yet? I think not.
Yeah. So Tuesday is the actual publication date, July 27th. It's available anywhere books are sold. I know they're being pre-ordered because we became Amazon bestseller a couple days ago, even prior to its shipping. So
congratulations.
Thank you very much. We've got a great marketing team at Greenleaf Publishing. Those guys are phenomenal, and they're rocking and rolling on that. So any place the books are sold, and if you need a place to determine where books are sold, you can go to dearwhitefriend.com, and at the bottom of our page, bunch of booksellers in there that you can go to and get the book. So we appreciate that. I hadn't said one thing, and I just want,
please.
I'm talking about Black and I'm talking about white. And some people might say, well, what about all the rest? And as they'll see in the book, that I make this case that our country's been structured with whites on top, blacks on the bottom, and everybody else in between. And I am completely convinced, and I think the data shows it, that if you solve for Black people, you solve for the nation. That if you create inclusive policies that touch Black people, everyone else in between is better off. Women are better off. Other people of color are better off, because we really did intentionally build this construct: whites on top, blacks on the bottom, and everyone else in between. And so for those people who are saying, well, he is so specific on Black people. No, I'm specific on the United States of America. And I believe we're a better country if we can include, African Americans. If we don't specifically call out African Americans, they will be left behind. And every single approach, intentional behavior, it doesn't work if you don't say I'm solving for Black people, because it is almost always easier to find to select a white woman or an Asian Indian. And I love my brown brothers and sisters, and I love my female sisters as well. But this construct in this country is strong, and it's kind of ingrained into what we've got. So whites on top, blacks on bottom, everyone else in between. And that's why I'm making that distinction.
Is that construct one of the things that made people uncomfortable when you shared the letters with them before you published?
That didn't come out as a super thing. I think
people accepted that.
By the time I say it the first time, I've built a case for it. But I can tell you one thing that got changed. It was some reader of the book, and you had to get, 40% into the book, maybe even 60% in the book, before I said the words, "I don't think you're a racist." And so I had a white friend said, if you're going to say that, just say it earlier, because I kept reading, waiting for you to call me a racist. And I thought, okay, I'll move it a little bit sooner. And now it's actually on the cover of the book. Again, it's a controversial statement for Black people and other people who are very conscious about this title. So I think we need all our voices, and I hope everybody that disagrees with me just agrees that I deserve to have a voice in this, and because I respect all of theirs as well.
Well, you did call it "Dear White Friend," so that does suggest you're not talking to racists.
Yeah, but I that's true. Because if you're a racist, you're not my friend. I think there is a notion, though, that all white people are racist, mainly because we live in a country that has racism kind of cooked into it. And I just don't agree with that. And so I thought I'd call it out.
Fair enough. Here's another question. How can companies intentionally increase BIPOC access to the informal opportunity network?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, I struggle with this question a little bit for the same reasons. These questions are complex. They've got cultural layers to them. They've got personality to them. They've got industry to them. And I'll just say the same thing I've said before. If we get intentional about the idea of doing it, and we have enough dialogue and intentionality about it, we'll find out ways to pull it off. And so if we try things that do not work and we talk with people about what they need and what helps them, then we'll try something else the next time. So I'm trying to be a little coy because I don't want to start solving problems in contexts that I do not know and have people say, well, he doesn't understand, or what about this, or I tried that. And so all I'm saying is when we get clear and intentional about what we want to do and we're willing to try it and fail, then we're going to make progress. I hope that wasn't too vague.
No, not at all. I think that's very fair. And I loved your answer to the question about what someone should do to try to make their environment more welcoming. Your answer was talk to somebody who knows how to make your environment more welcoming. And
yeah, because there are experts out there on culture, and there's assessments you can do in your organization to assess how culturally sensitive and how much bias is going on and how you look on promotions and pay. And I mean, if you've not looked at all that stuff, you could have a mess going on there that you're not even aware of.
So I'm going to ask you another question like that, and if your answer is the same, that's
You're going to stop
fine.
Asking me?
I'm determined. But you started this by telling us that part of what prompted you to write the book was attending some kind of DEI session.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people working in businesses listening to this are thinking about their own offerings. And I'm just curious, you don't have to be a racist to be uncomfortable with some of the programs that are introduced. Not all of them are considered effective. What's your general thought on those kinds of programs?
Yeah, I think they're all over the place. I think quality is all over the place. I think objectivity is all over the place. I think clarity of purpose is all over the place. And so I would say buyer beware. I think you got to buy that product like you buy IT services. You might want to vet those people out and make sure they actually know what they're doing and test it out. I will tell you that the 2-day course I went to was called Racial Equity Matters. And it was put on by the Racial Equity Institute out of Greensboro. And I think they do a really good job of working hard to be balanced. There's no doubt they're trying to make a point around the history of race in our country, but I think they use data to do it and not a lot of emotion and preaching. And that's the part I hate when you start preaching to me. I mean, this is not a religious thing. There's facts and figures and data around this and history. You don't need to preach. Just show me the data. Show me the real stuff. So I would tell people to be careful. References are a good thing. If it sounds like a sermon, it's probably something you want to be, at least conscious of. But there's some really good stuff out there. And I encourage people to get much more comfortable. So podcasts, articles, books. You can start with mine. It's a nice on-ramp. But even diverse movies, and get more comfortable with this, with Black dialect and dialogue. And because if the whole thing makes you uncomfortable, you're just going to be uncomfortable. And that's not helpful at all.
Fair enough. You have a chapter in the book about investing in Black entrepreneurship. To some extent, what you talked about in terms of thinking about being conscious and intentional about your supply chains, that's investing in Black entrepreneurship. Do you have other thoughts about that you would share?
Well, let's start with the premise. Here's the premise. If we don't have scaled up, multi-generational Black companies in our country, we are never going to be equitable. It just won't be, because of how our country runs. The biggest influencers in most communities are those companies that make money, hire people, give to campaigns, sit around the volunteer tables, sit around the corporate tables. And those people are generally people who own companies, and oftentimes they've been around for the last 3 generations or more. And so today, I'd be hard pressed to find more than 2 companies in this city, Cincinnati. And we've got a really good base of African-American owned business, but they're all first generation. And we're just not getting to the next generation of companies. And I think we've got a better chance now than we have in the past. So intentionality around large. I'm not talking about mom and pop. I'm not talking about small. I'm talking about wealth creating, multi-generational Black companies. It's got to become a strategy of ours because of how it can change the dynamics of how decisions are made, how philanthropy flows. And I don't know another way to do that wealth creation, that multi-generational wealth creation, than entrepreneurship. If you look at the top 1% of wealth, the $16 million of wealth and above, their largest single asset is their business. And so if that's true for white people, we got to make it true for Black. If not, then we've got people sitting at tables, if they're in tables at all, and they're just not equally able to be there. So I just think if I talk to a community that doesn't have an intentionality around growing scalable Black companies, I'm wondering how serious you are about equity. If all we're going to do is relieve people's suffering, we should do that. But if that's all we're going to do, how's that equitable? Sorry, I might have gone off a little bit.
Not at all. That was the question I asked. Did I miss anything, Mel? Is there anything from the book that you'd like to highlight, especially to an audience of business owners?
No, the point I'd like to leave them with, though, is just to be sure that I want to be sure I'm clear that what I'm proposing is good for America. It's good for all Americans. It'll save us money. It'll heal wounds that we've had in this country for a long time. They're only going to get worse. It will provide us the opportunity to pursue this promise of America, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone. And that's worth doing. And I'm here to work with people. I want to keep talking about it and taking action on it. And that's it. I think you've done a great job of interviewing me because you're a true professional.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I think so. I wish I could remember who. Somebody said we all do better when we all do better. And I think that's kind of your message. And again, I've read your book. I highly recommend it, especially to business owners who are trying to answer that question. What can I do? You have a lot of great advice in there. As I said before, a reminder, I will be publishing a video of this conversation in about a week. If you know somebody who needs to hear this conversation, please share it with them. Please tell them about the book. The easiest way to know when the video comes out is to subscribe to the 21 Hats Morning Report at 21hats.com. You can also find out about future guests we'll be having here. They won't all be as brave and as interesting as Mel, but they'll be okay. Mel, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate this opportunity. And listen, you can have me on anytime on any topic. I love your stuff. The content's always great. You're a great interviewer. So hats off to 21 Hats. And I hope we can do this again sometime.
We can. Thank you, Mel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.